Greetings, friends. In this video, we will continue talking about some serious fundamentalist secrets about various things in which they lie to us, minimizing them and making us believe that everything miraculous was created for no reason, and that we are an accident, that we only live to work and to be slaves of them for worthless pieces of paper, so that we can believe that we are better than others just for having more of these pieces of paper. Let me tell you something. Wisdom would always be greater than any amount of gold, since it carries mutual respect and appreciation. The wise will always be superior than the fool. Share knowledge will always be a show of affection and humility. We, the awakened beings, are here in a work of light and support for all humanity in the path of sharing knowledge. However, not everyone will be able to wake up in time. We should talk about this now, cause there are some who are close to awake, and they just need a little push in the right direction. We seek to meet all those old souls who know and are aware of all the deceptions under which all humanity is subjected. In first place, the word planet secretly means plane of ether, that is, this etheric plane where we live. They call it Earth. However, it would be better to call it ocean, since 75% of this known world is made up by water, like seas and oceans, and the sources of manna, the so-called springs. That, as we saw in previous videos, is where most of the fresh water in this world emanates from. In this video I will continue to talk you precisely about these giant bodies of water, the continental pools, also called oceans, place where the greatest amount of oxygen is generated. The so-called oxygen is a lighter water mixture form of ether, the kingdom of air. These kingdoms, or states, are dimensionally grouped in planes, as if they were heterogeneous substances. All the space and matter is made up of ether, which has several properties, and one of them is density, which is scientifically defined as the relationship that exists between the mass and the volume of anything. So, the higher density goes at the bottom, and the lower density is lighter and goes at the top. The sea, which is salty water, also has its own densities, their own ecosystems, as well as rocks and their different types. Thus, in the same way, all the other elements are grouped into kingdoms. So, nothing's a casualty. We are avatars. Etymologically, the word comes from the Sanskrit avatara, which means the personification of God, or a higher dimensional being, incarnating, or physically manifesting, as a human of this plane where we are. It is interesting to observe and realize that we possess the four alchemical elements. We emanate heat. We drink water. We step on the ground. And we also breathe air. We live surrounded by air, not by soil. This is very important, and just a very few will understand the greatness of this conception. Since the air we need for life is provided mostly by the oceans, more than the ground plants. These ecosystems produce almost 80% of the oxygen that exists in this world, and that continues to be generated day after day. Animals such as phytoplankton and marine algae, who live in coral reefs, as well as an infinity of processes carried out alchemically and symbiotically between this world and all its beings. In this way, everyone is part of everything, and everything works together as a very perfect system. The sun, with its cyclical movement, warms the tropical seas, providing them with warm waters, favoring and producing underwater currents due to differences in temperatures on the ocean waters. These habitats are home to many species of animals, those which give place to the alchemical and regenerative processes of each etheric realm. In addition, human beings also obtain great benefits from these processes. Since many of the medicines we use are obtained from these natural alchemical processes carried out by lots of species of marine plants, fish, and mollusks. They also provide us with food, which is those energies from other beings that we need to ingest to gain energy to live. This is something tremendous, and that no channel will talk to you about. The supreme alchemy of this world. But let's continue, since I would like to make it very clear that all this that exists are gifts for the world and all its communion. Since all matter, both animate and in its transition to inanimate, directly influence the bioalchemical balance of this wonderful world, surrounded by very different and colorful life forms. In this way, oxygen is the most abundant alchemical element in living beings, and in this plane, grouping its matter in order to its density mixture, settling down according to it. For example, we are lighter than water. This is where that legend about walking on water comes from. Realize our own divinity as an avatar composed of the four primordial elements and formed mostly by water and air, by soil. We must understand that all living beings are in an oxidation process that will inevitably lead to the loss of this physical body. As we oxidize, we become lighter as we lose matter. That's why death does not exist as such, but just as an oxidation of the iron of the blood. This is a tremendous secret which we'll deeply abord on future videos. The exhaustion of the metal that makes us up. The life energy that we all carry. The same that gives way to the loss of this material body. To the transition. The separation or disintegration that oxidation entails. Returning what is borrowed. Since only the soul is the one that, if ready, gives way to transcendence, to purification, the return to the stars, to those higher portals named in ancient legends, the Elysian fields. It is time to lead a life of love and respect in communion with nature and life. We must understand that we are part of this balance, since all human beings are in this world to thrive. That is another tremendous secret. The reason for us to be here. Since we all come to this world to make possible a communion of energies, in order to nurture our consciences with learning, with energies that make the gears to move, and that will take you up or down, depending on the way you live your life and the learnings you decide to have through the use of your will. Another gift. Just like the life, the breath of life, or spirit. Etymologically, it comes from the Latin word spirits, which means breath of life. In this way, each breath of oxygen brings us life, and at the same time, it brings us closer to the transition. The fundamental reserve of oxygen usable by living beings is in the so-called troposphere. That is, the layer closest to the ground. As higher you go, it's harder to breathe due to the density of oxygen that causes it to clump down in its proper place, according to its density. And just like ocean currents, it works the same with the air. The sun heats it up and rises it, while in the moon step, it cools it and makes it down. All these cycles are linked to the movement of the sun and the moon, greater secrets of which we will speak soon. However, it is important to know and realize how this cycle is completely linked to everything. Even plants and their photosynthesis. All this is an oxygen-generating process. While respiration causes the opposite effect, that is, the counterpart of the cycle, and its conversion into ozone. This reaction is totally reversible, so that ozone, absorbing ultraviolet radiation from the sun, turns back to oxygen, renewing again. In this way, one of the greatest mysteries for science is knowing how and when the generation of all the existing oxygen began. This element is known to be generated from the breakdown or separation of water molecules. Seeing how this world and its cycles do all these chemical separation processes naturally. Geochemistry, or most proper, geoalchemy, as well as the plant's processes to feed on by solar energy and excrete oxygen. Processes that nature does without help, and that we do not understand exactly how they do it, since we cannot yet replicate it with the same efficiency. This process, which we currently call photosynthesis, is the process where the energy that comes from the sun is collected and used by plants to break up the water molecules present in the soil and feed on off the carbon dioxide from our respiration in order to make oxygen. In other words, they also take something and give something in return. Same is with the sea plants and their processes. We must realize how society seeks or self-destruction, destroying our connection with nature, for not to care of it and sell it, instead of respecting and loving it. Those little papers that governments print Are they really above life and nature? We must realize all the impious actions that occur worldwide by all those people who hide behind the illusion of being better than others in this dimension, just because they have more pieces of paper. They pollute even our children's mind, causing them to have only materialistic goals. They exploit resources. They deprive others of them, the ones that don't have those papers. They hoard resources and enslave them, trading them for more illusional power. They don't care about life. Only their factories and their companies that saturate us with harmful products. The detergents and pesticides, the chemical substances, waste and toxic garbage, oil spills, uncontrolled fishing, and many other things that are destroying these natural habitats. In some places, coral reefs are dynamited to obtain construction materials, and mangroves are destroyed for the construction of roads, for tourist infrastructure, all with the aim of obtaining more pieces of paper, more illusorial power. It is necessary to adopt actions that lead to the protection of all the true lungs of the planet. Educate children in what really matters. Let us remember that schools and universities prepare us to be good slaves, to work without protesting for simple paper. They do not do it consciously. The system is already designed that way, for us to reproduce it. Let us not allow the enemy to continue educating our children. Let us teach them to live in freedom, out of the slavery of this system. It's time to get them out of the schools while we still can. It is time to make a positive change in this world. Since they do not command, we command. The wisest. Let's show them that we don't need them. Nature and our mind provide us with everything. At first it will be hard, but we must change the mentality and conscience of all our brothers, and especially of the little ones. Teach them to live differently. Tell them the truth of all that they hide from us. Arm them with wisdom and understanding, of respect and love for the sea and for all nature, for all life. The sea is such an incredible and unknown kingdom, so much that we are even terrified about what may be lurking so many kilometers below. At such incredible pressures, the sea and all its life are an incredible world of gigantic and fascinating creatures, some other legendary and mythical, that continue to baffle us to this day. All these beings, both animals and plants, provide countless alchemical processes that give return and regenerate all these habitats through cycles of physical and chemical interactions. Processes that are often considered indecipherable mysteries, even by the most orthodox science. All substances and enzymes, mixtures of fluids of all existing things. In a previous video, I had already told you about a substance called ormus, about its alchemical connection with the world and how this substance is present in both urine and seawater. But then, what is ormus? Well, ormus, or also called monatomic gold, is extracted from seawater, or urine, and it's a very dry and not salty white powder. It is a multimineral and superconducting compound that contains all the minerals that are concentrated in seawater. As far as is known, this concentrate is made up of about 36 elements, and studies have concluded that the composition, although it may vary depending on the portion of the water used, is more or less this. The elements in seawater are the same elements that are present in the human body. The ancient current comes from the recipes of ancient alchemists, conferring a status of a life elixir, being in this way an incredibly nutritional substance, reconnecting and restoring our body in an alkaline way, fighting oxidation. So then, we need to revalue what the ancient legends tells us. The legends and myths that we are now discovering as undeniable realities. Alchemy, an ancient magic that is currently translated as physical and chemical phenomena that work in this world for unknown reasons. All of these are foundations of so wonderful magic that it happens without most of them even realize of it. And this is so because there is a plot in the discoveries of modern science. For those who want to learn more about this, I recommend this book about the Masonic birth of modern science, as well as the studies of René Quinton and Laurino Dominguez, of which I already mentioned in the past videos, as well as the seawaterfoundation.us, among many other studies that should have already revolutionized medicine and pediatrics. However, all this is not convenient for them. And we now entering on issues such as the so-called pharmacy. In other words, the mafia of the drug and health industry. A cured patient is a lost patient. Therefore, any discovery that does not suit them will be covered up and labeled as harmful. Just like all the silent scientists. By saying monatomic gold, it doesn't mean that is the gold as we know it. Just as when a child is iron deficient, they are not given pieces of metal, but a plate of lentils or foods rich in iron. Those organisms that have already assimilated the mineral iron and transformed it into organic iron. In this way, we can understand how seawater, containing in itself all the elements required by the human body, helps us to regenerate in all aspects. And that is something that those people do not want you to know. We call oceans to this saline etheric realm. And science tells us, like everything else, that they originated by chance, by fortuity, and in an explosion. However, nothing here works just for the sake of it. Everything has a balance, and each creature plays a role within this ecosystem, within the alchemical balance of this world. All the metabolic reactions necessary for life to take place develop in an aqueous or liquid medium. For the correct operation of these reactions, it is necessary that the concentrations of water and solute being correct. That is to say, all those organic compounds that constantly decompose, feeding all kinds of tiny little creatures, universes within, thus helping to start the great cycle of osmotic equilibrium again. aquatic animals are completely dependent on this fluid relationship, as well as the micro-animals that make up the last cycles of assimilation and communion. From those who live in fresh water to those who only live in salt water. The saline degrees, the densities. But then, what's the difference between freshwater fish and salty water fish? And why they can't live in the density of the other? As I mentioned earlier, it does not make sense for beings to lose the ability to live in the sea, since supposedly all living beings come from there. In reality, each being was made specifically to provide alchemy to a certain stratum, and each one works in its own environment. This can be appreciated on the water they consume. Yes, they also drink water. But since they are in a very salty environment, marine fish ingest large amounts of water constantly in order to avoid dehydration, separating the water from the excess salts in their bodies. Thus, the extra salt is expelled to the outside again by 3 ways: droppings, the urine, and the gills themselves. Freshwater fish, on the other hand, retain salt instead of expelling it, since they are saltier than the environment in which they develop. Although, they also expel excess salt through urine. The word urine comes from from the god Uranus, the representative of heaven on earth, also called the rain or water maker, first god of water. Means original, primitive, or primal. Uranus was the partner of Gaia, that is, both fundamental creative forces of life and nature. Uranus was the father of Cronus and Saturn. In other words, we can consider him as the first deity, prior to everything written on papyrus. Let us remember that what is written in rock comes from previous eras, as well as water, which is much older than everything that exists in this world. We must awaken to all these ancient truths, since science will never be able to explain the absolute origin and creation of things, cause they are miracles that work perfectly in and for this world. Miracles composed of elemental and alchemical magic. All of this are occultism knowledge. That is, learnings that are encrypted and hidden to ordinary people. Very old knowledge, and legends that speaks of shocking processes that today would seem like magic to us. In reality, the history and origins of everything that exists is much very different from what they have told us, or what they teach us in any institute or university. We must understand that they have sold us the idea that knowledge works on their pyramidal way. That is, the one who is more educated is the most indoctrinated, and is the one who supposedly knows more, cause he accepts everything they tells as an undeniable truth, and defends the system without questioning anything. We invite you to doubt everything, to check everything they tell us with the observable, verifiable, and repeatable reality, with what our senses show to us. There's no need to break up our head to realize that this system works in a very wrong way. That they want to educate us to be just a bunch of fool conformist slaves. Now tell me, which world do you want for your children? A world of truth and light, of goodness and supreme communion with nature and life, or a world of materialism and fierce struggle to obtain worthless pieces of paper? We are in a war without quarter, and it is time to decide the world we want for our children. It is time to wake up and talk about this face to face. Day to day. Soon we will make this an incredible project. Share. We speak the truth, and we will be heard. You just have to wake up from the great deception. The system does not work. Time to get out. Reactive Factory Project.